New Year's morning in a Ukrainian village. The sun rises late and weak over fields buried in white, casting long shadows across the drifts piled against fences and doorways. Smoke curls from chimneys where families are stirring, where last night's celebrations have given way to the heavy sleep of too much food and drink. The world is quiet. The world is at peace. But someone is not sleeping. Between the village and a house on its outskirts, a small shape lies in the road. A dark interruption in all that white. A boy, perhaps 8 years old, perhaps younger. It's hard to tell with peasant children who never quite grow as tall as they should. He's curled in on himself, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around his chest. Fresh powder has begun to cover him, softening his outline, making him look almost like a natural part of the landscape. In his pocket, there's a handful of grain he never got to scatter. In his frozen fist, the seeds of a blessing he never got to give. They'll find him when they wake. They'll shake their heads and cluck their tongues and say how sad it is, how the frost was cruel this year. They won't ask why a child was walking alone through a blizzard on the coldest night of the year. They already know the answer. He was poor. He was hungry. He was doing what poor, hungry children do. The story is called Morozenko. In Ukrainian, moroz means frost, the bitter, killing cold that descends on the steppes in winter, that freezes rivers solid and buries villages under meters of snow. The suffix -enko is a diminutive, an endearment, the kind of ending you add to a child's name. Little Frost, Frost Child, the boy who belongs to winter. Whether this is the child's actual name or a title bestowed by the cold that claimed him, the author never quite says. The ambiguity feels deliberate. This boy is frost itself, not the spirit of winter, not some fairy tale creature, but its victim. The same frost that wealthy families curse as an inconvenience is the frost that kills children like him. He is named for the thing that murders him. Panas Myrny wrote this story in the late 19th century in Ukrainian, for Ukrainian readers who knew exactly what he was describing. They had seen children like Morozenko. They had stepped over them in the roads. Some of them had been children like Morozenko once, and survived only by luck. This is the story of one who didn't. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you believe these forgotten stories deserve to be remembered, if you believe that the literature of small nations, suppressed languages, and overlooked writers has something to teach us, if you believe that a Ukrainian child who froze to death a century ago matters as much as any other child in any other story, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support keeps the candle lit. It allows us to keep bringing these voices out of the silence. Tonight, we explore a tale that almost no one outside Ukraine has ever heard. A story so similar to Hans Christian Andersen's Little Match Girl that reading them together feels like discovering a translation. But Morozenko isn't a translation. It's a parallel. Two writers, two countries, two children dying in the cold, the same accusation. Andersen's Match Girl is known worldwide. Myrny's frozen boy has been forgotten, buried under the snow of history, waiting to be found. We'll tell his story. We'll explain the tradition he was trying to perform, the Ukrainian custom of scattering grain on New Year's morning that sent him out into the killing frost. We'll meet the author who wrote him into existence, a government bureaucrat by day and a radical writer by night. And we'll ask why some stories become universal while others remain trapped in the languages and nations that created them. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. To understand why Morozenko died, you need to understand what he was trying to do. In Ukrainian villages, New Year's morning brought a cherished tradition called Posivannia, the scattering of grain. As dawn broke on the first day of the year, boys and young men would fill their pockets with wheat or rye, step out into the winter darkness, and make their way to the homes of godparents, relatives, and neighbors. At each house, they would cross the threshold, scatter grain across the floor, and sing special songs called zasivalki, New Year carols that blessed the household with prosperity for the coming year. I sow, I scatter, I wish you happiness. May your wheat grow tall. May your cattle grow fat. May your family know no sorrow in the year to come. The grain on the floor was sacred. It couldn't be swept away until sunset. It served as an amulet, a charm, a promise of abundance. The seeds scattered by a child's hand would bring good fortune to the harvest, fertility to the livestock, health to everyone under that roof. In return for this blessing, the household would give the boys food, bread, sausage, pastries, sometimes coins. The earlier you arrived, the more generous the reward. The first boy to cross a threshold on New Year's morning was considered especially lucky, for the household and for himself. The tradition carried strict rules, accumulated over centuries of practice. Only males could perform Posivannia. It was believed that the first person to enter a home on New Year's Day should be a man. This brought good luck for the year ahead. A woman crossing the threshold first was considered an ill omen, a sign of misfortune to come. So the duty fell to sons and nephews, to godsons and young cousins, to any boy old enough to walk through the snow and remember the words of the songs. The timing mattered too. You had to arrive early before the sun climbed too high, while the magic of the new year was still fresh. The grain you scattered had to be good grain, wheat or rye, the staples of Ukrainian life, the seeds that would become next year's bread. You couldn't use barley or oats. The symbolism had to be exact, and the grain, once scattered, was holy. Sweeping it up before sunset would sweep away the blessing. Throwing it out would throw out the good fortune. Many families gathered the scattered seeds after the sun went down and mixed them with the grain they planned to plant in spring, believing this would strengthen the crop. For wealthy families, Posivannia was a charming folk custom, a way to feel connected to the old traditions, to honor the ancestors, to give the children something festive to do on New Year's morning. For poor families, it was something else entirely. For children like Morozenko, Posivannia wasn't tradition. It was labor. A wealthy boy scattered grain for the pleasure of it, received sweets and coins as treats, and returned home to a table already laden with holiday food. The ritual was play. The rewards were bonuses. A poor boy scattered grain because his family was starving. The bread or sausage he brought home might be the only food they would see for days. The coins might be the only money that would enter the household until spring. His songs weren't celebrations. They were work, performed in exchange for wages paid in bread. The tradition that felt so wholesome, so connected to the land and the old ways, was built on this foundation, that poor children would walk through the freezing dark to perform blessings for families who could afford to reward them. No one acknowledged this openly. The fiction had to be maintained. that Posivannia was about community and tradition, not about economics and survival. The wealthy families who received the carolers could tell themselves they were preserving culture, honoring custom, keeping the old ways alive. They didn't have to think about what happened to the boys who walked too far, stayed out too long, or encountered a night when the frost was stronger than their thin clothes could withstand. Panas Myrny draws the boy's world in a few spare strokes. A house too small for the family it holds. Walls that let in the wind. A stove that provides heat only when there's fuel to burn, which isn't often. Too many children, not enough bread. The poverty isn't dramatic. No one is dying of plague or fleeing from war. It's ordinary, grinding. The kind of poverty that doesn't announce itself but simply persists, year after year, generation after generation. The mother is the center of what remains. She stretches what little they have, makes decisions about who eats and who waits, keeps the children alive through winters that seem determined to kill them. The father is present in some versions of this type of story, absent in others, working elsewhere, dead, drunk, broken by the same system that's breaking his family. Myrny doesn't dwell on him. The mother is enough. She's the one who sends the boy out, not because she's cruel, because she has nothing else to give. The larder is empty. The last of the bread is gone. New Year's has come, and there's nothing to celebrate it with except the handful of grain saved specifically for this purpose, for Posivannia, for the blessing that might bring back food. The boy wakes in darkness. His stomach is empty. It's been empty for days, the gnawing hunger so familiar now that he barely notices it. The house is cold. The fire burned down hours ago, and there's nothing left to feed it. His siblings are still sleeping, huddled together for warmth under whatever blankets and clothes the family owns. His mother is already awake. She's been awake for hours probably, lying in the dark and thinking about what to do. When she sees him stir, she beckons him close and speaks quietly so as not to wake the others. His godfather's house. That's where he needs to go. His godfather isn't wealthy, but he's better off than they are. He'll have bread, he'll have something. The boy knows the way. He's walked it before, in better weather, on easier days. He can do it. She presses the grain into his hands. A small amount, carefully saved, the investment that's supposed to return dividends in food. She tells him to hurry, to be among the first to arrive, to sing loudly and scatter well. She tells him to come straight home with whatever he receives. She doesn't tell him to be careful. She doesn't tell him to turn back if the weather gets bad. She can't afford to. If he doesn't go, they don't eat. His godfather lives on the far side of the village, or perhaps in a neighboring settlement. The accounts vary. Not impossibly far. In good weather, a child could walk it in less than an hour. The path is familiar. Past the church, along the frozen creek, through the stand of bare trees, up the small rise to the house with the blue shutters. He's done it before. He knows every landmark. But this is not good weather. The temperature has dropped throughout the night, sinking to that dangerous cold where exposed skin freezes in minutes, where breath turns to ice crystals before it leaves your mouth. The frost, the moroz that gives the story its name, has come down hard, the kind of cold that kills livestock in their barns and old people in their beds. And it's still dark. The sun won't rise for another hour at least. He'll be walking by starlight, by the faint glow of snow, by memory and hope. He puts the grain in his pocket, wraps himself in whatever thin clothes he owns, and steps out into the night. Myrny doesn't inventory the boy's clothes, but we can imagine them. A shirt that was handed down from an older sibling, patched and repatched until the original fabric is barely visible. Trousers too short or too long, held up with a rope belt. A coat that might once have been adequate but has long since lost whatever warmth it offered. On his feet, if he's lucky, felt boots. Valenki, or perhaps just rags wrapped around his feet and tied with string. No gloves, no scarf. Perhaps a cap pulled down over his ears. Perhaps nothing at all. The wealthy children who perform Posivannia on this same morning are dressed in layers of wool, their boots lined with fur, their hands protected by mittens their mothers knitted during the long autumn evenings. They'll walk the same paths, sing the same songs, and never once feel the kind of cold that's already seeping into Morozenko's bones. He doesn't know that. He doesn't have a basis for comparison. This is how he's always dressed, how everyone in his family dresses. The cold is just something you endure. You walk fast. You keep moving. You try not to think about it. He starts walking toward his godfather's house. The village is silent around him. Every house is dark, every window shuttered against the cold. The celebrations of last night have given way to deep sleep, the kind of sleep that comes after too much food and drink, the unconsciousness of people who can afford to feast. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the smell of wood fires and the lingering scent of holiday cooking. Somewhere, a dog barks once and falls silent. He walks quickly, trying to generate heat, trying to reach his destination before the cold can settle too deeply into his body. His breath makes clouds in the frozen air. The snow crunches under his feet. That particular squeak that only comes when the temperature drops below a certain point, when the ice crystals are too cold to compress silently. The path out of the village is clear enough. He's walked it dozens of times. Past the well where women gather in summer. Past the smithy, cold and dark now. Past the last houses, where the village gives way to open fields. The fields stretch ahead of him, flat and white and featureless under the stars. Once he leaves the village, everything changes. The houses were some protection from the wind. Not much, but something. Out here, there's nothing. The gusts come sweeping across the steppe, carrying ice crystals that sting his face, finding every gap in his clothes, every patch of exposed skin. He hunches his shoulders and lowers his head, trying to make himself a smaller target. The path should be visible as a slight depression in the snow, a track worn by feet and cartwheels, different in texture from the untouched fields on either side. He looks for it, finds it, follows it, left foot, right foot, one step at a time. His fingers are already stiff. He shoves his hands into his pockets, one of them closing around the grain he's carrying. The seeds are cold against his palm. He wonders if they're as cold as he is. He wonders if grain can feel anything. Strange thoughts for a strange morning. He shakes his head and keeps walking. The gusts grow stronger as he moves farther from shelter. What was intermittent becomes constant. A steady pressure against his body, a wall of moving air that he has to push through with every step. The cold is no longer something he's experiencing. It's something he's fighting. An opponent, an enemy, something that wants to stop him from reaching his godfather's house. He thinks about the food waiting for him there. Bread, fresh bread, maybe, or at least bread that isn't stale. Sausage, if he's lucky. Maybe a pastry, sweet and rich, the kind of thing his mother can never afford to make. He pictures himself sitting by his godfather's stove, warming his hands, filling his stomach, gathering the food he'll carry home to his family. That's what keeps him moving. Not the thought of arrival, but the thought of return. His mother's face when he walks through the door with his arms full. His siblings waking to the smell of bread. The knowledge that he, the boy, made this happen. That he walked through the frost and came back with something. He pushes into the wind and keeps going. The first flakes fall so lightly he barely notices them. A speck of white drifting past his face. Another. A gentle dusting, almost pretty, catching the faint starlight and glittering as it falls. He's seen snow before, lived with it his whole life. A few flakes are nothing to worry about, but the flakes keep coming, and they come faster. Within minutes, the gentle dusting becomes a curtain. The stars disappear behind clouds he didn't see coming. The wind catches the falling snow and drives it sideways, turning the air into a swirling chaos of white. He can barely see his own feet. He can't see the path at all. This is a blizzard. This is the kind of storm that kills travelers, that buries villages, that writes obituaries across the steppe every winter. He should turn back. He knows he should turn back, but the village is behind him now, and he's not sure how far behind. His godfather's house is somewhere ahead. If he's more than halfway, it makes more sense to push forward than to retreat. He thinks he's more than halfway. He keeps walking. At some point, he couldn't say when, the path disappears entirely. He's been following it by feel, by the subtle difference in the snow's texture, by memory of where it should be. But the blizzard has erased all that. The fresh snow has covered everything, made everything the same. He takes a step and sinks deeper than he expected. He takes another step and hits something hard beneath the surface. A rock, a frozen rut, he can't tell. He stops. He turns in a slow circle, trying to see something, anything that will tell him where he is. The church steeple, a tree he recognizes, the shape of a building, anything. There's nothing, only white, only wind, only the snow coming down so thick he can barely breathe without inhaling flakes. He's lost. The realization hits him like a physical blow. He's somewhere between the village and his godfather's house, and he doesn't know which direction is which anymore. The wind has shifted, or he's turned around or the path curved and he missed it. Every direction looks exactly the same. Every step might be taking him farther from safety. The frost is inside him now. It's not just on his skin anymore, not just in his fingers and toes. It's in his blood, in his muscles, in the core of him. His legs are heavy, hard to lift. His thoughts are slow, like his mind is wading through the same drifts his body is struggling against. He knows, somewhere in the part of his brain that still works, that this is dangerous. This is what happens before people freeze to death. The cold gets inside you and starts shutting things down, one system at a time. First the extremities, then the muscles, then the mind. He's seen animals that froze in the fields. He's heard stories of travelers found in spring, preserved by the cold, looking like they're sleeping. He doesn't want to be one of those stories. He picks a direction. It feels right. It feels like it might be the way to his godfather's house, and starts walking again, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. The grain is still in his pocket. The blessing is still undelivered. He has to keep going. His pace has dropped to a stumble. Every step takes enormous effort now. Lifting his foot feels like lifting a stone. Putting it down feels like pushing through mud. The snow isn't that deep, knee-high at most, but it might as well be an ocean. He's wading through it, fighting for every meter, and the cold keeps getting worse. He stopped shivering. That's bad. He remembers someone telling him that once. Maybe his mother, maybe an older child in the village. When you stop shivering, it means your body has given up trying to warm itself. It means the cold has won. It means you don't have much time left. He should be scared. He thinks he should be scared, but fear requires energy he doesn't have. All he feels is tired, so tired, like he's been awake for days, like the only thing in the world that matters is lying down and closing his eyes. Not yet. He can't lie down yet. His godfather's house must be close. It must be. He sees something, a dark shape, barely visible through the swirling snow. It could be a house. It could be a barn. It could be a stand of trees or a fence line or a trick of his exhausted eyes. But it's something other than endless white, and he turns toward it. The shape doesn't get closer. He walks and walks, and it stays the same distance away, wavering in and out of visibility. Maybe it's moving. Maybe he's not walking straight. Maybe there's nothing there at all. He realizes, distantly, that he's crying. The tears are freezing on his cheeks before they can fall. He wipes at them with hands he can no longer feel, and the motion makes him stumble. He catches himself, barely, and keeps moving toward the shape. It's a fence post. That's all it is. A single wooden post, maybe part of a fence that continues in either direction, maybe standing alone for reasons he'll never understand. He reaches it and grabs it, holding on like it's the only solid thing in a dissolving world. A fence means people. A fence means a house nearby. If he can follow it, it might lead him somewhere. He lets go of the post and takes a step. His legs buckle under him. He goes down into the snow. The fall is slow, almost gentle, his body folding in on itself, his knees hitting first, then his hip, then his shoulder. The snow cushions him. It's softer than he expected, softer than the packed dirt floor of his house, softer than the straw pallet he sleeps on, like a bed made of feathers, like something welcoming him down. He should get up. He knows he should get up. If he stays here, he'll die. The snow will cover him, and the cold will finish what it started, and they'll find him in the morning, frozen solid, curled up like a sleeping child. He tries to push himself up. His arms don't respond properly. They move, but weakly, without strength. He gets his hands under him and pushes, and nothing happens. The signal is traveling from his brain to his muscles, but something is getting lost along the way. One more try. He gathers everything he has left and pushes with all of it. He rises a few inches and collapses again. The snow is so soft. The wind seems quieter down here, close to the ground. He's not as cold as he was, or he's too cold to feel cold anymore, which is probably the same thing. His eyelids are heavy, his thoughts are drifting. Just a short rest. Then he'll get up. Then he'll find his godfather's house and scatter the grain and sing the songs and walk through the door at home with his arms full of bread. Just a short rest. The wind fades, or he fades. It's hard to tell the difference now. Everything is becoming soft and distant, like a sound heard from underwater, like a memory rather than an experience. The cold that was stabbing him has become a kind of numbness, not unpleasant, almost comfortable. He thinks about his mother. He hopes she won't be too angry that he didn't make it. He tried. He really tried. The storm was too strong and he got lost and his legs stopped working. It wasn't his fault. He thinks about the grain in his pocket. All those seeds, saved for this purpose, carried all this way. They'll be wasted now. They won't bring a blessing to anyone. He wanted to scatter them across his godfather's floor, to see them bounce and roll, to sing the old songs and hear his godfather laugh, and receive the bread that would feed his family. He wanted to go home with his arms full. He wanted to see his mother smile. The thoughts drift away like the snowflakes, spinning into whiteness. His eyes close. His hand, in his pocket, is still curled around the grain. The sun rises on the first day of the year, pale and distant, barely warming the air. It climbs above the horizon and illuminates a world transformed by the night storm. The snow lies thick and smooth across the fields, unmarked, except where the wind has sculpted it into drifts and ridges. The sky has cleared to a hard, cold blue. The blizzard has passed, leaving behind a silence so complete, it feels like the world is holding its breath. In the village, people are waking. Children are pulling on clothes and filling their pockets with grain, preparing to go out and do their own Posivannia now that the weather has cleared. Mothers are stoking fires and preparing the food they'll give to the boys who come to their doors. The day is beginning. Someone, a farmer checking on his animals, a man walking to a neighbor's house, the account doesn't specify, takes the path toward the outskirts of the village. The path that leads past the fields, toward the distant houses where some families have made their homes. He sees something dark against the white. At first, he thinks it's an animal. A dog that wandered too far and got caught in the storm. A calf that broke through a fence. Something that can be dealt with quickly before the day's celebrations begin. He alters his course, walking toward the dark shape, curious but not yet concerned. As he gets closer, the shape resolves itself. Small, human, curled up in the snow like a child taking a nap, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around itself. The fresh snowfall has covered it partially, softening the outline, making it look almost peaceful. He starts to run. His feet punch through the crusted snow, and he stumbles, catches himself, keeps going. He knows already what he's going to find. He knows it from the stillness of the shape, from the way the snow has settled over it, from the terrible logic of a night like last night. He reaches the body and brushes away the snow. It's a boy, 8 years old maybe younger. His face is pale, almost blue, with frost glittering on his eyelashes. His lips are parted slightly, as if he was about to speak. His expression is peaceful, not twisted in fear or pain, but calm, like someone who fell asleep and never woke up. In his pocket, the man finds the grain, a handful of wheat, cold and hard, still waiting to be scattered. They carry him back to the village. Word spreads quickly in a community this small. By the time the man reaches the first houses, others have joined him, drawn by his shouts, by the sight of him walking with a burden in his arms, by the ancient instinct that makes people gather around tragedy. They know the boy. Of course they know him. Everyone knows everyone here. Someone runs ahead to tell the mother. She's in the doorway when they arrive, her other children clustered behind her. She's not screaming. Not yet. She's just standing there, watching them approach, her face absolutely still. She knows. She's known since dawn, probably, when she woke and realized he hadn't come home, when she looked outside and saw the depth of the snow that fell in the night. They lay him at her feet like an offering, like something precious and ruined, return to the only person who ever treasured it. Then she screams. The village mourns in its way. People come to the house throughout the day, bringing food the family doesn't have to cook for themselves, offering condolences in the formal phrases reserved for death. They shake their heads. They murmur about the cruelty of the frost, the danger of traveling in such weather, the tragedy of a child taken so young. No one asks why he was out there. Everyone knows. A poor boy doing Posivannia, trying to bring food home to his starving family. It's not a scandal. It's not even a surprise. This is what poor families do. This is what poor children do. Sometimes the frost takes them. Sometimes it doesn't. They'll bury him when the ground thaws. Right now, it's frozen too solid to dig. Until then, his body will be kept somewhere cold, which is everywhere. The grain from his pocket will be saved, perhaps, mixed with seed grain for spring planting, or scattered on his grave when he finally has one. The blessing he was carrying never reached his godfather's house. It never will. Myrny doesn't linger on the aftermath. He doesn't give us extended scenes of the mother weeping, the siblings asking questions that can't be answered, the slow and terrible return to daily life that follows any death. He doesn't need to. Ukrainian readers of his time knew exactly what this loss meant. They had seen it. They had lived through it. They had buried their own children, or been the children who survived when their brothers and sisters didn't. What we can imagine is the weight of it. She sent him out. She put the grain in his hand and told him to go. She watched him walk away into the darkness, a small figure disappearing into a world that was about to kill him. She had no choice. The family was starving, and this was the only way she knew to feed them. But choices made from desperation are still choices, and she'll carry this one forever. Every mother who loses a child replays the last moments. What could I have done differently? What if I had told him to wait for better weather? What if I had gone myself? What if I had found some other way, any other way, to put food on the table? The questions have no answers. There was no other way. The system that killed her son was designed to leave her with no other options. But guilt doesn't respond to logic. She'll wake in the night for years to come, hearing the wind, thinking of a boy walking into a blizzard because she told him to. The other children will grow up in the shadow of this death. They'll learn that the world is dangerous, that poverty kills, that even doing what you're supposed to do, following the rules, performing the traditions, trying to help your family, can end with your body frozen in a field. They'll carry that knowledge into adulthood, into their own families, into the next generation. Trauma reproduces itself. That's part of what Myrny is documenting. The poverty that killed Morozenko will continue killing, will continue creating these moments, these losses, these families shattered by deaths that didn't have to happen. The man who wrote this story was living a double life. Panas Myrny. Born Panas Yakovich-Rudchenko in 1849 in the town of Mirhorod in central Ukraine. Worked his entire adult life as a government bureaucrat. He started as a 14-year-old clerk in a county court, rose through the ranks to become a treasury accountant, and eventually achieved the title of state councillor in the Russian imperial administration. He wore suits, he filed paperwork, he served the system. By night, he wrote stories that exposed everything that system had done wrong. His pen name tells you something. Myrny means peaceful in Ukrainian. It was an ironic choice for a writer whose work was anything but. His novels and stories chronicled the lives of Ukrainian peasants with unflinching honesty. The poverty, the injustice, the way the system ground them down, generation after generation. He wrote about alcoholism and prostitution, about serfdom and its aftermath, about people trapped by forces they couldn't control. The censors banned some of his work. He kept writing anyway, publishing abroad when he had to, circulating manuscripts among trusted friends, building a body of literature that would outlast the empire he served. Historians call Panas Myrny the major figure of Ukrainian literary realism. That sounds dry, academic, the kind of thing you'd read in a textbook and immediately forget. But it means something specific. He was the writer who made Ukrainian literature look at truth, not the romantic nationalism of earlier writers, not the folklore and legends and heroic Cossack tales that painted the past in glowing colors. Truth, the messy, painful, uncomfortable truth about what life was actually like for ordinary people. His most famous novel has a title that's almost untranslatable. Do the oxen low when the mangers are full. It's a proverb, essentially meaning, does anyone complain when everything's going well? The answer, obviously, is no. But the novel shows what happens when the mangers are empty, when people have nothing, when the system that was supposed to protect them has become the thing that destroys them. He co-wrote it with his brother, Ivan Rudchenko, and it covers nearly a century of Ukrainian village history. Serfdom, emancipation, the reforms that were supposed to make things better and didn't. The slow, grinding poverty that persisted through every political change, affecting the same families, crushing the same people. Morozenko is a miniature version of that project. One child, one night, one death, standing in for thousands. Myrny wrote in Ukrainian at a time when Ukrainian barely existed as a literary language. The Russian Empire had spent decades trying to suppress it. The Ems Decree of 1876, issued just a few years before Myrny's major works were published, banned Ukrainian language publications, performances, and even song lyrics. Ukrainian was classified as a peasant dialect, a corruption of real Russian, not suitable for serious literature or educated discourse. Writing in Ukrainian was an act of cultural resistance. Publishing in Ukrainian was even more defiant. Myrny did both, even as he worked for the government that was trying to erase his language. He wrote in the tongue of the peasants he was documenting, using their vocabulary, their rhythms, their way of seeing the world. This is part of why Morozenko remains largely unknown outside Ukraine. The story was written in a suppressed language about a marginalized population, by a writer whose work was often banned or restricted. It was never translated the way Andersen's Little Match Girl was translated. It never entered the international canon. It stayed where it was written, read by the people who already knew what it described. Panas Myrny died in 1920 in the chaos that followed the Russian Revolution. He had lived long enough to see the empire he served collapse, to see Ukraine briefly declare independence, to see that independence crushed by Bolsheviks and civil war. He was 70 years old, a retired bureaucrat whose literary work had earned him recognition but never wealth. He was buried in Poltava, where he had lived most of his adult life. His house became a museum. His works became required reading in Ukrainian schools, at least until the Soviet authorities decided some of them were too nationalistic, too critical, too dangerous. Then they became samizdat, forbidden texts, passed hand to hand, read in secret. Now, over a century after his death, his work is being rediscovered. Ukrainian literature is finding new audiences, propelled in part by global attention to Ukraine's current struggles. The stories he wrote about peasant poverty and government indifference resonate differently now, in an era when Ukraine is fighting to exist as a nation. Morozenko, the Frost Child, is part of that legacy. A small story about a small death, waiting to be read by people who never knew it existed. Read Morozenko and the Little Match Girl side by side, and the parallels are impossible to ignore. Both feature a child, desperately poor, inadequately dressed for winter, sent out into the cold to perform an economic function. The match girl sells matches. Morozenko scatters grain. Both are trying to bring something back to starving families who have nothing else to hope for. Both walk through the cold, while wealthy families celebrate nearby. The match girl sees feasts through windows, Christmas trees glowing with candles. Morozenko passes houses where holiday meals are being prepared, where his labor will be rewarded with the scraps of other people's abundance. Both freeze to death. The match girl in a corner between two houses, surrounded by burnt matches. Morozenko somewhere between his village and his godfather's home, the grain still in his pocket. Both are found in the morning by people who shake their heads and say how sad it is, and then go back to their lives. Hans Christian Andersen published his story in 1845. Myrny wrote later in the century. There's no evidence that one influenced the other, no translation that crossed between Denmark and Ukraine, no literary connection that would have brought the stories into conversation. They arose independently from different cultures, in different languages, describing the same horror. That's what makes them so powerful together. The same story emerged twice because the reality was universal. Strip away the similarities, and the differences reveal something about each writer's purpose. Andersen gives his match girl visions: a warm stove, a roast goose, a Christmas tree, her dead grandmother descending from heaven to carry her away. The death is softened by these images. We're told that she saw beauty before the end, that she escaped into light, that heaven received her with love. Myrny, if the accounts are accurate, offers no such comfort. There are no visions in Morozenko, no angels, no warmth, just a boy getting progressively colder, losing his way in the storm, falling into the snow and failing to rise. The realism is unsparing. Ukrainian literature of this period prided itself on showing things as they were, not as we might wish them to be. This reflects the different traditions the writers came from. Andersen was a romantic at heart. Even when he wrote tragedy, he believed in transcendence, in the soul's journey to something better, in the comfort of faith. Myrny was a realist, committed to documenting the world without sentiment, without consolation. His poor didn't go to heaven. They just died. Both approaches are valid. Both can devastate, but they hit differently. Andersen makes you weep for the beauty the match girl found at the end. Myrny makes you rage at the ugliness that killed Morozenko with nothing to soften it. Different methods, same message. Both writers are saying that comfortable people let children die, that the systems creating poverty, whether Danish capitalism or Ukrainian serfdom and its aftermath, are not natural disasters, but human choices. That the frost doesn't select its victims at random. Society selects them by deciding who gets warm clothes and who doesn't, who eats and who starves, who matters and who can be sacrificed. The match girl's father will beat her if she comes home without money. Morozenko's family will starve if he doesn't bring back food. Neither child has a choice about walking into the cold. The choice was made for them by circumstances they didn't create and can't escape. Both stories end with discovery, the body found, the head shaking, the murmured sympathy. In both cases, the sympathy is hollow. It costs nothing. It changes nothing. The people who find the frozen child will go back to their warm houses and eat their holiday meals, and perhaps feel briefly sad before forgetting. That's the accusation. Not that individuals are cruel, most of them aren't, but that the system is designed to produce these deaths, and everyone participates in the system, and no one is innocent. Andersen's Match Girl is known worldwide. She's been translated into hundreds of languages, adapted into films and ballets and operas, referenced in countless works of art and literature. Disney made an animated short about her. Scholars have analyzed her symbolism. Mention the Little Match Girl to almost anyone educated in the Western tradition, and they'll know what you're talking about. She's part of the shared cultural vocabulary, a universal symbol of childhood poverty and suffering. Morozenko is virtually unknown outside Ukraine. You won't find English translations readily available. You won't find scholarly articles analyzing the story's themes. You won't find film adaptations or stage versions or any of the cultural machinery that turns a story into a monument. Search for him in English and you'll find almost nothing. A few scattered references, a brief summary on a book-selling website, silence. The Frost Child exists in Ukrainian for Ukrainian readers, and that's where he stayed for over a century. Why? Why does one frozen child become an international symbol while another remains invisible? Partly it's the language. Ukrainian was suppressed for centuries, first by the Russian Empire, then by the Soviet Union. The Ems Decree of 1876 banned Ukrainian language publications outright. Even after that ban was lifted, Ukrainian literature existed in a subordinate position, taught less, translated less, distributed less than Russian literature from the same region. Works written in Ukrainian didn't travel the way works written in Danish or English or French traveled. They weren't picked up by international publishers. They weren't assigned in foreign universities. They weren't available. Partly, it's the politics of canonization. Whose stories get told, get remembered, get elevated to universal status? Western European writers had advantages that Eastern European writers were denied. Denmark was a small country, but it was part of the cultural conversation of Western Europe. Ukraine was a colonized region within an empire that wanted it to disappear. Andersen became a global figure. Myrny became a figure of Ukrainian national literature, important within that context, invisible outside it. Morozenko isn't a lesser story than the Little Match Girl. It's an erased story, made invisible by the same forces of power and suppression that Panas Myrny spent his career documenting. The irony is bitter. He wrote about systems that crushed the powerless, and then those same systems crushed his work. Posivannia still exists. In villages across Ukraine, children still fill their pockets with grain on New Year's morning. They still visit neighbors and relatives, still scatter seeds across thresholds, still sing the old songs, wishing prosperity for the coming year. The tradition survived Russian imperial rule, Soviet suppression, independence, and war. But the economics have changed. Modern Ukrainian children who perform Posivannia do it for the joy of it, for cultural connection, for the fun of dressing up and singing, for the candy and treats they'll receive. They're not walking through blizzards to bring home food their families can't otherwise afford. The stakes are different. The tradition has become what it always pretended to be, a celebration, not a survival strategy. That transformation is a kind of progress. It means fewer families are desperate enough to send their children into dangerous weather for the sake of a meal. It means the tradition can be enjoyed rather than endured. But it also means forgetting that the charming custom has a shadow history, forgetting that children died doing this, forgetting Morozenko. Every tradition involving child labor has bodies buried underneath it. The match girls who froze on European streets while selling their wares, the chimney sweeps who suffocated in English flues, their small bodies wedged in passageways too tight for adults, the factory children who lost fingers to machines, who breathed textile dust until their lungs gave out, who worked 16-hour days and died before they were old enough to vote. Morozenko stands for all of them, the children whose deaths were acceptable costs of systems that benefited everyone except them, the small bodies that were carried home and mourned briefly and then forgotten, while the systems that killed them continued grinding forward. We don't build monuments to these children. We don't name holidays after them. We tell their stories occasionally, when a writer like Andersen or Myrny forces us to look, and then we go back to enjoying the traditions they died performing. This isn't an accusation, it's an observation. We've always been this way. We've always been able to hold tragedy and celebration in the same hand, to mourn the dead and benefit from their deaths simultaneously. Morozenko is just one more name on a very long list. Ukraine, as of this telling, is at war. The country is fighting for its existence against an invasion that seeks to erase Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian language, Ukrainian culture. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Ukraine loses, Ukrainian literature, including Morozenko, becomes a historical curiosity, the literature of a nation that used to exist. Telling this story in English is an act of cultural preservation. It's small in the grand scheme of things. One story, one video, one brief addition to the tiny fraction of Ukrainian literature that exists in translation. But culture survives through acts like this, through people who say, "This matters, this is worth knowing, this deserves to be remembered." Panas Myrny wrote in a suppressed language about suppressed people. His work was banned, restricted, forced underground. He kept writing anyway, believing that the truth he was documenting would eventually find its audience. A century later, that audience is still growing. Every person who hears Morozenko's story becomes part of the chain of transmission that keeps it alive. The grain is still in his pocket when they find him. That detail, if Myrny includes it, and the accounts suggest he does, is devastating in its simplicity. All those seeds, carefully saved through the lean months of winter, carried through the storm in a small hand that's now frozen shut around them. They were meant to bring blessing and abundance to his godfather's household, meant to return bread and sausage and perhaps a few coins to a family that had nothing. Think about what that grain represented. In a family with nothing to spare, they spared this. They set aside seeds they could have eaten, could have ground into flour for a few more mouthfuls of bread. They saved them because the Posivannia tradition promised that investment would return multiplied, that a handful of grain scattered across a threshold would bring back food that weighed many times more. The economics of blessing, the arithmetic of desperation. A poor family's bet on the kindness of slightly less poor neighbors. The bet lost. The grain never reached its destination. The songs were never sung. The seeds never bounced across his godfather's floor, never served as an amulet for the new year, never got mixed with planting grain to strengthen the spring crop. They stayed in his pocket, useless, while the boy who carried them stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being anything except a shape in the snow. What happened to that grain? Myrny doesn't say. Maybe they buried it with him, a final offering to a child who died trying to give offerings. Maybe his mother saved it, planted it in spring, grew wheat from the seeds her dead son was carrying, a harvest touched by grief, bread baked from tragedy. Maybe it was scattered on his grave when the ground finally thawed enough to dig one. The blessing finally delivered, months late, to the only home he would ever occupy again. Or maybe it was thrown away, lost, forgotten, like so much else about the poor, the powerless, the children who die unnamed and unmourned. The grain doesn't know. The grain is just seeds. But in Myrny's hands, those seeds become a symbol of everything that was supposed to happen and didn't. A future that froze before it could grow. Morozenko, Little Frost. He's named for what killed him. Or maybe he's named for what he became. Not a boy anymore, but a symbol, a warning, a ghost that walks the roads between villages whenever the temperature drops and the wind picks up. Ukrainian folklore is full of winter spirits, creatures that embody the cold, that punish those who venture out unwisely, that represent the lethal beauty of the steppe in January. Morozenko could be one of them, a child transformed by death into something elemental, something eternal. But he's not a spirit. He's a victim. He died because he was poor, because his family was starving, because the systems that were supposed to protect him instead sent him out into a blizzard to earn food by singing songs. He died doing what he was supposed to do, following the rules, performing the tradition. The frost just happened to be stronger than he was. Panas Myrny wrote this story to make his readers uncomfortable. He wanted them to see the tradition they celebrated from another angle. Not the charming folk custom, not the continuity with ancestors, not the festive songs and scattered grain. He wanted them to see the child walking through the snow, getting lost, falling, failing to rise. He wanted them to ask, is this acceptable? Is this the cost we're willing to pay for our traditions, our systems, our comfortable lives? The question extends beyond 19th century Ukraine. It extends to anywhere children suffer while adults celebrate. Anywhere poverty makes small bodies expendable. Anywhere we've decided that certain deaths are just the way things are. Morozenko died over a century ago in a country that most English speakers couldn't have found on a map until recently. What does his death have to do with us? Everything. The systems that killed him are the same systems that kill children today. Different forms, different names, same indifference. The frost is still falling somewhere. The children are still walking. Somewhere in Ukraine this winter, a child will fill their pockets with grain. They'll walk to a neighbor's house in the early morning darkness. They'll cross the threshold, scatter seeds across the floor, sing the old songs in voices that haven't changed much in centuries. They'll receive treats and coins and smiles. They'll come home safe, hands full, part of a tradition that stretches back longer than anyone can remember. They won't think about Morozenko. Why would they? He's a character in a story most of them have never read, a name in a history that's been half forgotten. The tradition has outlived him. The joy has outlived the tragedy. Maybe that's as it should be. Maybe the best memorial for a child who died trying to participate in a celebration is a world where children can celebrate safely. Maybe Morozenko's ghost is appeased by every successful Posivannia, every boy who makes it home, every family that doesn't have to bury a frost child in the spring. Or maybe he's still out there, still walking, still looking for his godfather's house through the endless snow. Panas Myrny made sure we'd never know for certain. Until next time.